Mississippi. My southern excursion continued as I entered Mississippi. I headed north to catch the Natchez Trace Parkway. The Parkway is a historic road that runs from Natchez, Mississippi to Nashville, Tennessee. Some people think that it was forged in prehistoric times by animals on the hunt for better grazing lands and the waters of the Mississippi River. Native people groups furthered its creation for trade and served as a guide to European explorers. As it goes, around 1801, it was used by the U.S. as a mail-carrying route into the Southwest Territory. By 1935, it gained national park status and started its facelift with an asphalt road in 1938, but not completed until 2006. The allure for me as a cyclist is that the speed limit never goes over 35 miles an hour, and it's closed to all truck or commercial traffic. It was the safest and best way through Mississippi, not only for riding, but also for the free campgrounds along the trail. It seemed like a magical place, and I was excited to continue deeper into swamp country. Unfortunately, the trade-off for safer surroundings and tree cover was the swaths of insects in every direction. I would find this to be a problem all the way to Georgia. But what else could I expect from the South during May? Mississippi is simply hot and sticky. You could cut the humidity like a stick of butter. It's a huge difference after coming out of the desert only a couple weeks before. The sweat stays on me all day now. I had to find ways to wash my clothes more often, and the evenings were not cooling down anymore. Welcome to summer. My first day on the trail, I met 4 fellas who were in their 50s and 60s riding together. One of them had circumnavigated the country by himself in the 80s. He said that after he finished the 2-year trip, he went home to work for a family friend. The same week he arrived home, there was a marathon and he signed up and ran it. This dude was a legend, and this group of guys were my kind of people. We all had dinner together and shared laughs about traveling. They all had interesting backgrounds and were family men with corporate jobs waiting for retirement. They had all been friends for a long time and tried to get together once a year to travel. They tipped me off that the water at the campground was not safe to drink due to its rank stench and brown color. I ended up filtering some water out of a small stream nearby, which I was excited to use the filtering system I'd been carrying the whole time. I slowly scooped water from the shallow creek through the small mouth of the filter bladder. I squeezed 4 liters through the filter straw in about 15 minutes. The next morning, I woke up around 6 a.m. to a light rain. The group of guys were already packed out, and they told me a big storm was about to come through. I immediately went into crisis mode and started packing up my camp. Nothing is worse than setting up your tent at the end of the day when it's wet. I got everything together just moments before the storm let loose. Thankfully, the entrance of the campground had a pavilion, and I waited there for 2 hours until the rain had passed. Once the clouds blew through, the weather was gorgeous. It started out foggy and brisk, and within 10 miles, the sky started to clear up. It quickly warmed up and was back to Mississippi's old humid self. One pleasant effect of the storm was a steady breeze for the rest of the day. The Natchez Trace was beautiful over the next couple days. It offered ample tree cover and the forest was gorgeous and alive. At one point, I followed an alternate path alongside a man-made lake. It passed a Native American monument burial ground that the government had preserved. At least twice a day, I would come across a pull-off that featured information about the trace's history. I continued to feel affirmed that taking this route was a good choice. I had thrown out most of my original plan and was taking it day by day on the southern route. I made broader goals to see my friends in different cities, but my daily goals were at the whim of my surroundings and where I could sleep or find a place to refuel my supplies. I had never left myself a lot of room for spontaneity on bike trips in the past. On this trip, I tried to build in a buffer by starting the day at sunrise. But usually, I was hell-bent on mileage and just getting as far as possible to reward myself with dinner or a safe place to stay. Today was one of those days where I just needed to make it somewhere before dark. A cyclist told me about a campground, but its location seemed obscure. I knew it was somewhere after mile marker 120, but didn't know exactly what I was looking for. It was called Ratliff Ferry, but there's nothing on the Parkway map about it. I eventually found a Ratliff Ferry road at sunset and followed it through a series of trailer parks deep into the forest. It dead-ended right into the campground. Hallelujah. They had a gas station, bar, restaurant, campground, and a boat launch into the delta. They catered to everybody's needs. I scoped out the campground before realizing I had to pay at the gas station. I soon found out this place was the local weekend hangout. Before walking into the station, a fella sitting outside at some picnic tables asked what I was doing. His name was Paul, and he had ridden his bike up here from home just to hang out and eat. He ended up buying me a beer, and we talked about our different adventures. He said he once rode a snowmobile through Yellowstone Park with his wife. They had just retired and were putting some miles on his Harley to ride cross-country. He talked about living in this part of Mississippi his whole life and now trying to go out more since he's retired. More and more people started piling into the restaurant, and Paul seemed to know everybody. A couple sat down with us and started talking about the town and giving some context on what I would experience that evening. Paul explained to me that tonight was steak night. They had 20-ounce steaks for $20, and it was a big deal. My mouth was watering even though I wasn't planning on buying any food. I decided to bite the bullet and ordered a burger and some mozzarella sticks. Another couple came over after Paul left and started talking to me. Dale bought me a beer and introduced me to his wife and grandson who were there for a nice weekend dinner. Dale was a local contractor and seemed to know everyone in the county. As we continued to hang out into the evening, he took me inside and introduced me to everyone at the bar. I met all the employees and even the owner. There was another lady who used to be the owner, but she sold it and still helped out from time to time. It was really homey, and I loved meeting everyone. Dale also kept offering to buy me drinks and food. It was out of control. I told him I was staying at the campground and needed to leave to set up my tent, but he mentioned a huge storm was rolling in and I shouldn't sleep outside. It ended up he had a trailer in the summer living community down the road and offered it up to me because he and his wife weren't staying there. He also runs a boat rental business and offered that I could take out any of his boats or kayaks. Being offered a place to stay seemed awkward to me. I think I have horror movie syndrome instilled in my head. I tried to make a conscious effort to trust my gut and accept hospitality. I had to go out of my comfort zone and try to trust strangers and assume the best. It's not always easy, but it's a lesson I learned over and over and would continue to accept. As it got darker, I noticed black clouds rolling in. At that point, I decided I'd take him up on his offer so I didn't have to tent in the rain. I rode all my gear to his house and took a shower. Before I could even think about going back to the restaurant, the storm let loose and it was pouring down rain. Dale came by and picked me up so we could hang out at the bar a little longer. We settled in for the night around 10 p.m., and they started showing me the art around their house. They explained that their son Zach is a woodworker and had made it all. The art opened up another story about their lives. Zach hiked the Pacific Coast Trail a couple years earlier, and he was shown a lot of hospitality and kindness by strangers. They were so grateful for his experience that they decided to give the same hospitality to travelers that they encountered. It was a beautiful worldview, and I was quick to agree. I'm continually proven that there is kindness in the world. When they left for the night, I thanked them again for allowing me to stay, and my heart was at ease. In the morning, I caught Dale outside getting his fishing boat ready to go out on the water. I told him to send me a line in the future as he shoved off. I followed soon after with a kayak. I figured I would have 30 minutes to kill in the water before I needed to leave on my bike. I brought the kayak down to the water to plop it in. I noticed there were a bunch of holes in the bottom, and I never knew kayaks had holes. I was too lazy to put my swim trunks on, so I just barged it with my biking pants. I paddled out of this swamp area where all the houses had private boat docks. There were tree overhangs and lily pads. It felt cinematic to float through. The air was cool and foggy due to the storm last night. There I was, in the swamps of Mississippi, floating down the river and searching for my next adventure. There was a thick mist in the air and willows hanging over the water like gatekeepers. The water eventually spit me out into the big river and towards the boat launch next to the gas station. I found Dale and waved at him while I did circles around the bogs that were everywhere. I waved at the fishermen and was pleased that I decided to float for a bit. After 20 minutes, I figured it was time to head back, but little did I know there was a fork in the river. I didn't pay close enough attention to which gully led me back to Dale's house, and ended up going the opposite direction on the big river. I went a half a mile in before realizing I was lost and missed a turn. Thankfully, Dale found me with his motorboat and told me how to get back to his house. I was getting kind of frustrated because I only had myself to blame for not paying attention, but I made it back safe, put up the boat, and headed out into another 70 miles on the trace. On the Natchez Trace, there aren't a lot of easily accessible towns. Even the ones you can get to don't have very many services. I was out in the woods surviving on my own in rural Mississippi. I'd say the most memorable town I saw during my short time on the trace was Jackson. My immediate reason for riding into town was to get some real food. I pretty much ate beans and ramen for 3 days and needed some soul food. This would be my first experience with Southern gas station food delicacies. I would come to find more in Alabama and Virginia. There were these mom and pop gas stations, and they would cook food for breakfast and lunch. The place I found had a deli counter with hot food ready to eat behind the glass. Biscuits and gravy, medium cooked egg sandwiches, potato wedges, chicken tenders and breasts. I could smell the fried heaven as soon as I opened the door. It was like a dream come true. It reminded me of this time I went to Canada for a church trip in high school. We drove 14 hours straight to Winnipeg, Manitoba, and stopped for gas somewhere in North Dakota. This truck stop had a similar case of food, with an array of kebabs that would make your knees weak. My best friend Dan and I both ate a barbecue bacon meatball kebab, and our lives were never the same. My sentiment for gas station food is ingrained, and Mississippi was hitting the spot. After lunch and some grocery shopping, I rode around town to feel it out. Jackson is a big college town and the capital of the state. There's white picket fences and banners on light posts advertising something about the town. It felt like I was watching that movie Pollyanna, which gave me really creepy vibes. I may have been projecting, but to me, the air felt thick with injustice. I felt the past's equality marches, the white supremacy, and the history of a Jim Crow South. I personally can never feel the same things that the African American community feels about the civil rights movement, but as I rode through town, I contemplated what they had to go through to fight here. All the senseless violence, all the unjust laws that our patriotic politicians put into place. It was a lot to process and humbling to be in a place that I'd only heard stories about in history books. Later that same day, my soul was shaken again when I got stopped abruptly by a herd of vehicles parked on the side of the road. It was unusual to see parked cars in the ditches, and I assumed maybe they saw some wildlife and were just being tourists. As I walked my bike closer, I realized there had been a car accident. Someone hit a tree head-on and flipped. The front end and the roof were bent in, and there was no sign of movement or voice inside the vehicle. I gazed upon the small crowd of people with a grimace and asked if they heard anything or called 911. They had alerted authorities and were waiting for emergency services to arrive. I never followed up on what the outcome was, but I could only guess that the severity of an accident like that resulted in death. I figured there was nothing I could do to help the situation, so I decided to leave the scene and ride on. I felt the tragic implications of the wreck and decided singing and sobbing was the most appropriate thing I could do to mourn the event. Tragedies like this are sobering and make you think about your life, who you love, and the fragility of existing. Life is short and we should do what makes us happy, but also learn how to support others' happiness. Don't let fear own your life, and don't let recklessness guide your compass. I've learned in my own seasons of loneliness and depression that you should hold on to the people you get in the moment. Let the hope that today gives you brush off onto the next people you will share a season with. Let's give each other a blank slate. The joy of strangers' kindness and support has lifted my spirits here in the South. Each person that shined their light on me helps my heart desire to shine on others. It's nice to know that even as media divides our country, there are still a lot of amazing people out there. You don't have to have the same worldview to be kind and show respect towards your fellow humans. My heart softened as I contemplated how I can perpetuate the same actions and love that others showed me here on the road.